Greetings, friends and guests of the channel. I present to your attention a weekly report on the situation in the world. If it doesn't bother you, put your finger up and write a comment under the video. Thanks to your secret insider. The announced death of Pope Francis and the upcoming announcement of the death of King Charles mean that the satanic rule of the West is coming to an end. The P3 Freemasons say that Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines will become the new pope. This is because there's gold in the Philippines to support the new financial system. These events may have been caused by the death of Richard Armitage. The case of Richard Armitage, the former number 2 man at the U.S. State Department, shows how literally a cult has taken over governments in the West. This cult, also called the Black Hats, is what we call the Khazar group. Its roots go back to the ancient satanic state of Assyria. As the Armitage case shows, it has now been defeated by Western military intelligence. Armitage, who died on April 13th, was a relative of the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley and was a cousin of Crowley's daughter Barbara Bush. If you compare the photos of Armitage and Crowley, the family resemblance will be undeniable. According to some sources, he was the highest-ranking occultist in the West. We cannot confirm this, but he has been the de facto ruler of Japan for the past 2 decades. His case illustrates in detail how the dark forces use extreme terror to control the highest levels of government. In 2000, he sent former Japanese Prime Minister Nobuo Takeshita to Alaska, where he was chased by helicopter through the snow and then brutally removed. The video was shown to the Japanese leadership as a warning about what would happen if it tried to disobey or sell Japanese assets in U.S. Treasury bonds. I was informed about this by both a member of the Japanese imperial family and a high-ranking Japanese military intelligence officer who was shown the video. I have stated this publicly on several occasions, and Armitage has never denied it. After this event, Armitage became the de facto dictator of Japan. His Armitage NYE reports have been working instructions for the Japanese government since 2000. As a result, Japan was no longer run by smart bureaucrats, and instead it was systematically robbed by hedge funds. Our sources report that Armitage died while being interrogated by the White Hat military about his worldwide control network. He sang like a canary, and now he's being dismantled. This applies not only to Japan, but also to most Western countries. I remember asking George Soros and Paul Wolfowitz about the families who own the Federal Reserve Board, and they both expressed obvious horror before dodging the question. This system of terror is still operating in the United States and other Western countries. Henry Makov, who has done a lot to expose this dark structure, says, I asked Mike Adams, Greg Hunter, and Candace Owens to interview me, not to mention Tucker Carlson, Stu Peters, or Joe Rogan. No one wants the terrible truth. Trump, Putin, and Netanyahu belong to the Black Hats who are planning another horror under the guise of a new global conquest. Although I think he doesn't understand that the Black Hats are using the avatars of Trump and Putin to give the impression that they support genocide. He's right when he claims that most alternative media outlets are controlled by the opposition. We asked for interviews with these and other prominent figures, but they refused us. One of them, whose name is a household name, said they would be eliminated if they agreed to an interview. Experts of the controlled opposition must adhere to acceptable arguments. For example, they warn everyone against using a real ID card because it would limit our freedoms. At the same time, a real identity card has been around for a long time. NSA employees told me many years ago that they can track and listen to you with a credit card if you use it. Not to mention that your mobile phone is a GPS-enabled phone listening device. So, these people are a false, controlled opposition that distracts us with a false issue that we must fight. Makov claims that the cult of the Black Hats wanted to recycle 90% of humanity and then force each member of the cult to control 2,800 slaves for all time. This is their planned new world order. to understand how large-scale their propaganda operations are. Although Israel accounts for only 0.1% of the world's population, the country accounts for almost 50% of all messages, that is, about 226 million. They dominate other media outlets as well. To get rid of this mind control, we need military proceedings with families like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. This is justified because they use terror against prominent people to impose their program of chaos. They also control the Federal Reserve Board, but not for long. British intelligence, Russia's FSB, and Donald Trump are now part of an alliance that seeks to destroy this black sect. This process is already in full swing. Trump's attacks on Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell are a good example of this. He will leave when I tell him. If I want to kick him out, he will leave very quickly. It's not just about removing the Fed chairman, but also about taking control of your magical money printing machine. The head of the British MI6 claims that Powell participated in an extremely illegal act, which consisted in allowing the Federal Reserve Bank to fraudulently buy its own government bonds through the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and cryptocurrency funds. When demand is artificially inflated in order to reduce the yield and, consequently, the cost of interest payments to the U.S. Treasury, this is fraud, which is a criminal offense. Regardless of the jurisdiction of the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg, all this requires investigation. He adds, "This is the most serious accusation against the National Treasury that I have ever seen, and much more serious than the Libor scandal." The ongoing takeover of the Fed is the reason for the news reports that Trump will not meet with the fake King Charles, who was used as a signatory for the release of the FRB funds. Perhaps that's why Vice President J.D. Vance met with the Pope at Easter. After the meeting and shortly before this report appeared online, the fake dad was declared dead. What is happening now is that experts are creating a future iteration of the financial system and migrating datasets, and so on and so forth. This is necessary because the savings rate in the United States has fallen to 0.6% of GDP. The U.S. Treasury relies on foreign investors to finance government debt, which is now higher than ever before. The Treasury needs to restructure 33% of its $36 trillion government debt over the next 12 months. Foreign investors are not buying, so negotiations are underway with the Asians on a deal for the anniversary. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is not involved in this case because he failed our review during a phone call with someone else on Sunday evening. MI6 was obviously referring to Bessent's phone conversation with Alex Soros. They suspect that Alex Soros is the heir of Soros Sr., whom they call the CEO of the infamous DVD Dachau, known as the Fourth Reich. It's a small bomb, but they keep popping up, yeah. A report by Gordon Duff, which describes how the Anglo-Saxon Five-Eyed Secret Service browses DV-DIS as an example of her control network. Here's how Senator Pocahontas Elizabeth Warren warns that if President Trump fires Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, the stock market will collapse. The alliance not only captures the Federal Reserve, but also targets the Nazi regimes in Europe. There are many news reports confirming this claim. Last week, the head of the Rothschild clan, Jean-Michel de Rothschild, a.k.a. Brigitte Macron, held a conference in Paris with the participation of U.S. leaders. After the meeting, Foreign Minister Marco Rubio said, "If no compromise is reached in the next few days, the United States will withdraw from the war in Ukraine. This is not our war. We will simply leave. Russia needs to move. Too many people are dying," U.S. President Donald Trump wrote on social media on Friday, referring to negotiations on ending the war in Ukraine. This means that Trump basically gave the Russians the green light to purge the EU. Without the United States, the game is over for Ukraine. That's why the American Fox News channel calls Kiev a part of Russia during the broadcast of the Easter service. The silver-haired five-star General Douglas MacGregor explains why the U.S. military is not ready to fight for Vladimir Zelensky and his regime. Zelensky is a jerk who speaks only Russian and grew up in Russia, has no real ties to Ukraine, and is not associated with any of the oligarchs, and Victoria Nuland and the rest of these people were chosen as puppets for Ukraine. They are all part of the same clique. Most of those who want us to stand up for Ukraine want us to expand the fight in the Middle East and wage war against virtually everyone in the region until the entire Middle East is under Israeli domination and hegemony. We must either wake up, get rid of these people and destroy them, or let them expel them because they pose a clear and real danger to the survival of our country, or we will perish. Polish intelligence also confirms that Germany, the Baltic states, and France will not be able to hold out against Russia for more than a few weeks. Now the Russians will make their move. It's really, I'm not being ironic right now, it's incomprehensible how the European Union is openly ready to resume the European Nazi ideology. We will do everything possible to eliminate this ideology once and for all, and Europe will return to its values, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov promises. The end of black hat rule in Europe coincides with the end of black hat rule in the Middle East. In Afghanistan, Russia is helping the Taliban destroy terrorist networks. The Russian government has recognized the government of the Afghan Taliban, thereby clearing the way for major projects such as the Trans-Afghan Railway and the Turkmenistan-Afghanistan-Pakistan-India gas pipeline project, which has been suspended since the 2010s. In cooperation with Russia, the Trump regime rejected Israeli plans to attack Iran. This means that the people who have been trying to unleash World War III for more than 30 years, chanting "Bomb, Bomb Iran," have been stumped. It is reported in Iranian government circles that the agents of the Khazarian group in Iran who participated in this project to foment artificial Armageddon will now be brought to justice. They say that the deal with the United States has led to a sharp drop in the prices of gold and the US dollar in Iran, as well as lower prices for all other goods. The Iranian Bazaar and intermediaries are liberal and advocate for the Khazar group and therefore against the mullahs. These people took advantage of the devaluation of the Iranian currency against the US dollar and the US sanctions against Iran. They buy all the goods from local producers, accumulate them, and create an artificial shortage, which leads to much higher prices than they would be without accumulation. The Central Bank of Iran has stripped the system of such liquidity that people can no longer afford to pay high prices. If people stop buying goods, the bazaar and intermediaries will suffer. Any agreement between Iran and the United States that lifts sanctions and releases Iran's huge foreign exchange reserves will lead to a drop in the US dollar and force liberals to take shelter. Sources say that the last time Trump allocated a frozen $12 billion so that Iran could buy Western aircraft. The same people who are trying to drag us into a war with Iran have overthrown Christianity. Gordon Duff, the White Hat intelligence chief, writes, "The Rothschild financial network, ostensibly secular, has long been a silent sponsor of experimental technologies designed for control rather than progress. But what is even more shocking is the architecture of religious subversion that supports it. As described in the Schofield Reference Bible, a document funded and distributed by Zionist interests in the early 20th century, American evangelical Christianity was deliberately used as a weapon and turned upside down. The goal, to transform Christian theology into a militarized, pro-Zionist, apocalyptic force designed to serve both geopolitical goals and spiritually sterilize American consciousness. The result: Christianity in the United States has been satanized, its compassion has been redirected to war, its mysticism has been destroyed, and its language has been hijacked by corporate prophecy networks. The Church, which once posed a threat to technocratic occultism, has become its useful host. We are also witnessing a campaign against British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who was manipulated and blackmailed. He just confirmed that he passed the HIV test. MI6 sources indicate that Starmer was tested for HIV because the videos allegedly show him and Lord Ollie in compromising positions in a private office. Meanwhile, in Canada, the People's Party is putting itself up for election as an alternative to the Masonic government. Removing compromised politicians is likely to lead to much more. The Chemtrail Task Force is enabled. No more theories. No more denials. On the direct orders of President Trump, this elite unit defeated the Deep State's meteorological warfare program, targeting separatist operations within NOAA, the so-called National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. But NOAA did not protect the climate. She was waging a war against the American people. NOAA, the Trojan horse of the Deep State, what looked like a climate agency, was actually a chemical weapons department disguised as climate research. Insider sources now confirm that flights along chemical routes were carried out from runways controlled by NOAA. Internal data models tracked the population's response to chemical exposure. The secret spray chiefs group organized the entire operation. It wasn't a study. It was a biological experiment. Repression against the population, atmospheric control, and the public should never know about it. The silent war in heaven is over and justice will prevail. Trump's task force is naming names. Charges have been filed. These snitchy bureaucrats in lab coats believed they were immune, protected by fake testimony and media silence. You were wrong. The evidence was intercepted. The connection was intercepted. Criminal proceedings are currently underway. Some of these agents are already changing their minds to avoid being charged with treason. Betrayal from 30,000 feet. Now they're crashing. Total media blackout equals total complicity. Where is the press? Where is the outrage? No. Where? MSM is silent. CNN and the New York Times are all silent. They ignore this story not because it is false, but because they want to hide the crime. Every time you stay silent, you prove that you were involved in this. This is high treason, and the media is to blame too. Billing has just started, and this is just the beginning. Other authorities are next. The war in heaven was the first stage. There was pure action. Another sign that some very unusual announcements are coming is that Jeff Bezos has just held an occult ceremony with an obviously fake space trip to try to awaken the sleeping masses and promote his version of technocracy. You can learn more about the fake, occult, sex magical, and ritual flight of the Blue Origin phallus from Gregory's. Then we will find out that, according to White House Innovations are Michael Kratzios, the United States has technologies that can manipulate and warp time and space. Our technologies allow us to manage time and space. They make distances disappear, make things grow, and increase productivity, he explained without going into details. Later in his speech, Kratzios emphasized that overcoming the state's sclerosis would give Americans the opportunity to make scientific discoveries that bend time and space, do more with less, and move us further into the vast expanses. Could this be the reason that Trump is saying, "I believe that we will have a very good business with China"? Trump sounds very confident, adding that he is sure that no one can compete with us, no one. It seems that Trump is betting on previously secret technologies as the main negotiating tool in the upcoming negotiations with China. I hope this is true because otherwise the United States will not have a strong arm. When he announced that he would raise tariffs on imports from China to the United States to 245%, the Chinese dismissed the move as meaningless. The fact is that exports to the United States account for only 2.7% of China's GDP. In addition, the United States will go bankrupt before it can start producing its own products again. For example, If the United States wanted to restore production of its own iPhones, the first shipments would not begin until 2028, and each phone would cost more than $3,000. The Chinese have much more gold than they have claimed so far. The CCP has accumulated 32,000 tons of gold, which is at least 6 times the official figure and almost 4 times the amount of fake gold reserves publicly claimed by the United States. Despite all this, if the United States really wants to solve the problem through dialogue and negotiations, it should stop exerting extreme pressure, threats, and blackmail and start talking to China on the basis of equality, respect, and mutual benefit, said State Department spokesman Lin Jian. China's position is very clear. There is no winner in a tariff or trade war, Lin said, adding China does not want to fight, but it is not afraid to fight. The Chinese also point out that in 2023, the United States had a trade surplus in the services sector of $278 billion, so the situation is not as bad as Trump portrays it. An agreement with the Chinese on a new financial system will be worked out at the end of May, Asian intelligence and Western intelligence sources promise. Meanwhile, HMM is still desperately trying to prevent this.